I never thought a simple move across town would change my life forever, but that's exactly what happened last spring. My name is Alex, and I've been living in the same apartment for nearly 5 years when I got offered a promotion that required relocating to a different neighborhood. It wasn't a massive change, just 15 minutes farther from downtown, but it represented something bigger. A fresh start, a new chapter, a chance to reinvent myself in a space that wasn't filled with memories of my ex who had moved out 8 months earlier. I was excited about the change, but also terrified. Moving has a way of forcing you to confront everything you've accumulated, both physically and emotionally, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that kind of reckoning. The anxiety had been building for weeks as I procrastinated packing. 3 days before the moving truck was scheduled, I was still staring at empty boxes, overwhelmed by the task ahead. That's when Jamie offered to help. We had met through mutual friends about 4 months earlier and had been circling each other in that ambiguous space between friendship and something more. He was the kind of person who lit up rooms without trying, quick to laugh, thoughtful in conversation, and impossible not to watch when he wasn't looking your way. We grabbed coffee a few times, joined group outings, and texted almost daily, but neither of us had made any definitive move to clarify what was happening between us. "I'm pretty good at organizing," he had said with that half-smile that always made my stomach flip. "Plus, I've moved 7 times in the last decade. I'm practically a professional." I wanted to decline. The thought of Jamie seeing the chaos of my apartment, the remnants of my life with Thomas still lingering in corners, felt too vulnerable. But I was desperate, and if I'm being honest, the thought of spending a full day with him was too tempting to pass up. The morning he arrived to help, the sky was that perfect shade of spring blue that makes you believe anything is possible. I had been up since dawn, frantically tidying what I could, trying to make the mess look intentional rather than the result of months of emotional avoidance. When the doorbell rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find Jamie standing there in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bag from my favorite bakery. "I figured we'd need fuel," he said, stepping inside and taking in the scattered piles I'd created in a last-minute attempt at organization. "Wow, you've really embraced the chaos method of packing." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, no judgment in his voice, just gentle teasing. "I was going for a modern art installation," I replied, taking the coffee gratefully. "It's called procrastination in cardboard." The easy laughter that followed broke the tension I'd been carrying, and somehow, I knew the day would be okay. We started in the kitchen, which seemed like the least emotionally charged room. Jamie had a system: categorize, purge, wrap, pack, and he walked me through it with patience. As we worked, conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by the sounds of dishes being wrapped and boxes being taped. He told me about growing up in a military family, moving every few years, never quite putting down roots. I shared stories about my childhood home, the same house for 18 years, the security of knowing every creaky floorboard. "That's why I keep so little," he explained, holding up a mug I'd forgotten I owned. "When you move as much as I have, you learn that most things are replaceable. It's the memories that matter, not the objects." I nodded, but couldn't help thinking about the box of Thomas's things I still hadn't returned, hidden in my bedroom closet. Some objects carried more weight than others, and Jamie seemed to sense my hesitation as we moved from practical kitchenware to more personal items. The living room brought us to my bookshelf, and that's where the real unpacking began, not just of objects, but of ourselves. Jamie ran his fingers along the spines, pulling out titles that caught his interest. "The Price of Salt," he read, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't they make this into a movie?" "Carol," I nodded. It was the first gay novel I ever read with a happy ending. It mattered to me at a time when I wasn't sure happy endings were possible for people like us. I hadn't meant to say so much, but something about the way he held the book, carefully, respectfully, made me want to share. "I know what you mean," he said quietly. "I spent so much of my life thinking I'd have to choose between being honest and being happy. Finding stories that showed otherwise, it was like finding water in a desert." We stood there for a moment, a book between us, something deeper than friendship flowing in the space between our words. Then he smiled, breaking the intensity. "Let's make a special box for the books you'll want right away in the new place. The ones that feel like home." As the morning stretched into afternoon, we developed a rhythm. He'd find something, ask about it, and I'd share the story behind it. Sometimes the stories were simple, a souvenir from a trip, a gift from a friend. Other times, they opened doors to deeper conversations. When he found a framed photo of me with my parents, I told him about coming out to them in college, the year of silence that followed, and the slow, painful reconciliation we'd built since then. That must have been incredibly difficult, he said, carefully wrapping the frame in bubble wrap. My parents were surprisingly okay when I came out, but my older brother, that relationship is still complicated. He says he accepts me, but he never asks about my dating life, never acknowledges that part of who I am. Do you want him to? I asked, realizing I knew very little about Jamie's romantic history despite the growing connection between us. He was quiet for a moment, sealing the box of photos before answering. I think I just want to be seen completely by the people I love. Not just the parts that are easy to accept, but all of me. His eyes met mine, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Don't we all want that? To be fully seen? The question hung there as we broke for lunch, sitting cross-legged on the floor with sandwiches Jamie had packed. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, favorite movies, embarrassing stories from college, places we both wanted to travel someday. But that question lingered beneath everything. Don't we all want to be fully seen? After lunch, we tackled the bedroom, which I had been dreading. This was where the remnants of my relationship with Thomas were most concentrated. The closet still held the winter clothes he had forgotten to take. The dresser drawer that had been is still empty because I couldn't bring myself to use it. Jamie noticed my hesitation as we stood in the doorway. We can leave this for another day if you want, he offered. But I shook my head. No, it's time. I've been avoiding this room for months. That's probably why I took the new job, to force myself to move on, literally and figuratively. Jamie nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. Let me know how I can help. As we sorted through clothes and bedding, I found myself sharing the story of Thomas and me, how we'd met in graduate school, moved in together after a year, planned a future that slowly unraveled as we realized we wanted different things. The breakup had been mutual but painful, a slow recognition that love wasn't enough to bridge fundamental differences in how we envisioned our lives. The hardest part wasn't losing him, I admitted as I folded a sweater that had been a gift from him. It was losing the future I thought we'd have. I had this whole life mapped out, and then suddenly, the map was gone. I've been feeling lost ever since. Jamie sat beside me on the edge of the bed, our shoulders almost touching. I had a similar experience with my ex, David. 3 years together, and then one day he tells me he's taken a job in Seattle. He asked me to go with him, but it felt like an afterthought, not a decision we were making together. I realized I'd been fitting myself into his life instead of building one together. What did you do? I asked, aware of how close we were sitting, how intimate the conversation had become. I stayed, he said simply. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but also the first time I chose myself over someone else's vision of what my life should be. That was 2 years ago. I'm still figuring out what my own vision looks like. As the afternoon wore on, we worked our way through the apartment, room by room, memory by memory. The physical act of packing became intertwined with emotional unpacking, each object a prompt for another layer of ourselves to be revealed. We talked about family dynamics, career aspirations, political views, spiritual beliefs, all the things you're not supposed to discuss in polite company, but that formed the bedrock of real intimacy. By early evening, most of the apartment was packed into neat, labeled boxes. The space looked bare, transitional, caught between what had been and what would be. We were sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by the organized chaos of my life in boxes, when Jamie spotted something I had hidden under the couch. "What's this?" he asked, pulling out a small wooden box I recognized immediately. My heart raced as he handed it to me. "It's, a memory box," I said, running my fingers over the carved lid. "I started it in high school. It has things from important moments, concert tickets, notes from friends, my college acceptance letter." I hesitated, then opened it, revealing the collection of mementos inside. "It's silly, I guess." "It's not silly at all," Jamie said, leaning closer to look. "It's beautiful, actually. A physical timeline of your life." I sifted through the items, explaining each one: the dried corsage from senior prom, the hospital bracelet from when I had appendicitis, the fortune cookie prediction that had come true. At the bottom was a folded piece of paper I hadn't looked at in years. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. "This is the first love letter I ever received," I explained, not reading it aloud but remembering every word. "Senior year of high school, from a boy who moved away before anything could really happen between us. He was the first person who made me believe I could be loved for exactly who I am." Jamie was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you still believe that? That you can be loved for exactly who you are?" The question caught me off guard, piercing through the comfortable rapport we'd built throughout the day to something more vulnerable. "I want to," I admitted. But sometimes I think I've spent so long trying to be what other people need that I'm not sure who I really am anymore. Jamie's eyes held mine, steady and warm. I see you, Alex. Not who you're trying to be, but who you are. The person who keeps a memory box under their couch, who can't throw away their ex's winter clothes, who reads novels with happy endings because they need to believe they're possible. He took a deep breath. And I think you're someone worth knowing completely. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. My heart hammered in my chest as I realized we had reached a crossroads. I could thank him for his help, offer to order dinner, steer us back to safer ground. Or I could be brave, step into the vulnerability that had been building all day. I'm scared, I whispered, not specifying of what, but knowing he would understand. Me too, he admitted, his voice equally soft. But I'm more scared of pretending this isn't happening, of walking away without saying what I really want to say. Which is? I prompted, hardly breathing. That today wasn't just about helping you pack. That I've been looking for an excuse to spend time with you since we met. That every time you share another piece of yourself, I find myself wanting to know more. He paused, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. That I'd like to see where this could go, if you're interested. The moment stretched between us, full of potential energy. I thought about all the boxes surrounding us, my life packed away, ready for transition. Maybe this was part of the change I needed, not just a new apartment, but a new openness to possibility. I'd like that too, I finally said, the words both terrifying and exhilarating. I've been feeling the same way, but I wasn't sure if it was just me, or if the timing was right, or Jamie's laugh interrupted my nervous rambling. I don't think there's ever a perfect time. There's just now, and what we choose to do with it. As if to emphasize his point, he reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, and took my hand. His palm was warm against mine, slightly calloused from work, completely right. We sat there for a moment, hands linked, smiling at each other like teenagers, before he leaned forward. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a declaration. But when I responded, it deepened into something more certain. His hand came up to cup my face, and I found myself leaning into his touch, all the tension of the day, of the past months, melting away in the warmth between us. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, the apartment around us seemed different. The bare walls and stacked boxes no longer felt like an ending but a beginning. We had spent the day packing up my past, but in the process, we had unpacked something new and fragile and full of promise. So, Jamie said, his smile lighting up his entire face, about that new apartment of yours. I hear it needs unpacking. Know anyone who might be willing to help? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I might. Though I should warn you, unpacking could take a while. I'm counting on it, he replied, squeezing my hand. Some things shouldn't be rushed. As the evening light filtered through the half-empty apartment, casting long shadows across the boxes containing pieces of my past, I felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected turn. Moving day had forced me to confront what I was leaving behind, but it had also brought Jamie into my life in a new way, opening the door to possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine. 6 months later, I'm settled into my new place. The boxes are unpacked, the walls decorated, the space truly mine in a way my old apartment never was. Jamie comes over several nights a week, and we're talking about whether it makes sense for him to keep paying rent on his place when he spends most of his time here. It's early still, but it feels right in a way that's both exciting and calming. Sometimes I think about that day among the boxes, how the simple act of packing up my belongings created space for us to unpack our hearts. How vulnerability, though terrifying, can be the doorway to connection. How endings and beginnings are often the same thing viewed from different angles. Moving taught me that we carry the most important things with us wherever we go, not just memories and mementos, but the capacity to open ourselves to new experiences, new people, new love. Jamie was right when he said some things shouldn't be rushed. Building a life together, like packing and unpacking, takes time and care and attention to detail. But standing here now, watching him hang a picture on what was once a blank wall, I know that the journey is worth every moment of uncertainty. Because in the end, finding someone who sees you completely, who helps you pack away the past while unpacking a future together, that's the greatest adventure of all. Total_char_count, 17,648.